for more on this. Now we are joined by Asia One correspondent Jagruti live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Jagruti, for joining us once again. So, Jagruti, so what has the U.S. administration said about this latest round of strikes on Iran, and what objectives has Washington outlined?
Yes, these latest strikes from the US is the sixth consecutive night of strikes, said US CENTCOM. In that report, I think he very clearly outlined what CENTCOM has said, that these were strikes targeting Iran's military infrastructure, trying to degrade their capability to stop vessels transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, the issue that has sparked these tit-for-tat strikes between the US and Iran. US CENTCOM said that they had targeted coastal surveillance, air defense systems, logistical infrastructure and maritime capabilities as part of their strikes. Attached to this social media post was a video of unclassified video showing a plane and munitions being launched and hitting what appears to be Iranian targets. CENTCOM has also said that 50,000 US troops remain stationed in the region, ready to take further action if needed. And all of this comes as Iran has accused the US of targeting civilian infrastructure, which in its post, CENTCOM did not make any mention of military infrastructure, just saying that they had targeted military sites. The US has always insisted that it only targets military sites, but in recent days, US President Trump has once again repeated his threats to target infrastructure like bridges if Iran doesn't come back to the negotiating table. In response, Iran has threatened to widen its US targets, and in retaliation to these strikes, as you mentioned, Iran says it struck a power and desalination plant in Kuwait. Now, all of this is raising concerns about the potential violations of international law, which is what could happen if civilian infrastructure is targeted, and also raising concerns that the spiraling conflict could keep the two sides further away from the negotiating table.
And just to add on your latest point just now, so how is Iran reacting politically and also militarily to these latest US attacks?
Yes, so as we've been talking about militarily, it's through continued retaliation on US bases in the region, but also targeting, as I say, those plants in Kuwait with the threats of more targets if the US doesn't cease. And I think politically, on both sides, there is the military escalation, but there is language on both sides that suggests that they are open to diplomacy. Iran's top negotiator in the last couple of days, one of its top negotiators, has talked about the need for Iran to use diplomacy as a tool to achieve its goals. This is something that J.D. Vance also said in his interview with the podcaster Joe Rogan about the US's use of diplomacy alongside its military actions. And the US president has also effectively said that negotiations can continue, and he's described the Iranian release of a dual national who was detained for the last 2 years by Iran as a goodwill gesture. So there are these mixed messages coming through. It's clear that both sides are keeping the door open to negotiations, but with the risk of escalations further, it's very difficult to see how they can maintain the two. Mediators are saying that eventually, Pakistani mediators are saying eventually both sides will have to come to the negotiating table.
And how is US responding militarily to these latest growing security concerns in the Gulf region?
Yeah, so there are a variety of things at play. Obviously, we've just talked about the tit-for-tat escalations, the US strikes on Iran for a sixth consecutive in response to the tensions over the Strait of Hormuz and the dispute over who has control. Iran says it does. The US denies that, rejects that, says that it does. Donald Trump has backtracked on talks of a toll on 20% of cargo that goes through the strait as a payment essentially for the US maintaining security there. The US House, however, reinstated its military blockade of Iranian ports. At the same time, as we mentioned, the US is keeping the door open to negotiations. And in terms of its posturing in the region, 50,000 troops still in the Middle East. This had been increased by about 10,000 troops in the last few months. But there are reports in the Wall Street Journal and particularly about how the US might be rethinking its bases in the region because they're potentially targets for Iran, and they might be more of a risk than an asset, given that these strikes between the two sides have resumed. So it's a very complicated situation here as the two sides continue to trade attacks.
So is there any indication from Washington that basically diplomatic channels remain open, and what are these? Or does the administration, do you think, appear to be preparing for a prolonged military confrontation?
I think both are true at the same time. As we've talked about, the US is clearly open to diplomacy. JD Vance has mentioned it. The president has hinted at it. The fact that negotiators are still talking, Iran and Qatar are still talking, but the Pakistani mediators are still trying to bring both sides back to the table. So clearly, this is an ongoing process. But with tit-for-tat strikes of this kind, there is a risk of accidents happening, or there's the risk of this becoming just the norm, of this turning into a long, grinding, low-level war of attrition until something happens to escalate things further, a really serious accident like an accidental strike of infrastructure, which was not intended, which then precipitates a response from either side, or the killing of civilians or troops, or something like that, that is considered serious enough to warrant a serious response. So there is risks of accidental escalation, I think, which a lot of people are worried about. But as I say, mediators are hoping that there is enough goodwill left amongst these two sides who are deeply mistrustful of each other, but that there is enough self-interested realization that both sides need to come to the negotiating table. The US, because this war and the recent resumption of strikes is causing oil prices to go up. Friday morning, they went up by more than 1.5%, over $81 a barrel for Brent crude futures. In Iran, it's the degrading of its defenses, of its infrastructure, and the hit to its economy. It was hoping that through these peace negotiations that it would be able to secure the release of frozen assets around the world. That hasn't happened yet. And of course, with the resumption of strikes, that appears to be a long way off. So mediators are hoping there's enough self-interested realization that the best solution, the best path forward is through negotiations.
Many thanks, Jagruti.